Great greetings, everyone. Welcome to Spiel Times. I'm Pingal, your correspondent for today, and I'm so glad you're watching this video. You have probably heard about World of Tanks, World of Warships, or World of Warplanes. If you haven't, let me brief you about them. These are warfare-based, massively multiplayer games published by Wargaming, a Belarusian company that have some seriously dedicated players from across the globe. With the Indian gaming market blooming so rapidly, Wargaming is branching out in our country and have some great plans for us, the Indian gamers. To talk about all the interesting stuff, I have with me Artur Płóciennik, executive producer, and Victor Bardovsky, publishing director of World of Warships. We had the privilege to attend this event as an invited media outlet thanks to Basic Marketing Private Limited. Without their coordination, this interview wouldn't have been possible. This interview was recorded during the World of Warships event in Delhi on 18th September 2019. So, how did the idea of branching out to India come about?
Okay, so this has come from a couple of factors. First of all, we already have a certain amount of players from India playing the game, and we see how this community is growing. And we see that actually the engagement is pretty high. I mean, it's we don't see any deviations like in a negative way comparing to other regions. So which means that the audience is there. On top of that, of course, India is a growing market. So we see the trends, and we feel like India will be really huge within next, say, 5 to 10 years. And we want to be here with our game. So we decided that it will be a smart move to give it a try and see whether it's working how we foresee it, or there will be some different. But still, when we were entering the market, we did a lot of tweaks and a lot of unique content because we want to be serious now. Because these players that are already playing the game, they are with us already, and they have discovered the game on their own. We didn't pay too much efforts for India specifically. But right now, it's official launch with partners, with the support, and with much more attention being paid to a specific territory. We do believe that the audience is here and the market is ready in terms of the even PC games, even though I know that India is by far not the biggest PC market on the planet.
Okay, so you are planning for the INS Delhi and INS Mysore ships, right?
Mysore is, I would say, almost confirmed, so it will be there. On Delhi, the story is a little bit different because we still have to clarify some things before we can clearly say, yes, it's coming like within next X amount of weeks. Just because it's not really easy. We have to make sure that we have all the blueprints. We have to make sure that we have all the materials to create a real Delhi. Because our audience is really into history, really into the realism, and all our ships are 100% accurate to the blueprints. And even if we don't have blueprints, we use a lot of different photos that we can get from different archives, so we would understand how actually a ship looked like back in the day. So this is the important part.
So will those ships be introduced as normal ships or just premium ships at the beginning?
That's too early for us to say. We usually don't make that decision about whether those ships will be premium or non-premium until we're sure that we're going to have them in the game. So right now, for those two, we're doing research. For Mysore, it's mostly completed, and we're reasonably sure that we will be able to make the ship model. So then we'll be able to introduce it. And for Delhi, we're not sure yet. We still need to finish that research and to see whether, first of all, as Victor said, whether we will have enough references and blueprints and pictures to recreate that ship model, and where it fits into the gameplay of our tier structure currently. Whether we have a specific place where we can put that ship in the game, and as part of that second evaluation, we will look at whether it should be premium, or whether potentially it fits into a future potential ship branch somewhere.
Yeah, because the most important thing is that the ship should be a very good fit for the game itself. We try to avoid having OP ships as well as underpowered. because it's not about playing with the patriotism, like, hey, we have a Delhi for India, so everybody please go and buy it. No, we don't earn this way. The most important part is the community part, community perception, and the quality of the gameplay that the person gets when he gets hands-on on the ship. So this is the important thing.
Okay. So you were planning to merge the Indian, like for the new players, the Indian server will be like tied up with the European server.
Yes.
So why not Asia?
This is first of all the quality of life for Indian players because of the time differences that are there. So it will be much more comfortable to play. On top of that, we checked the ping aspect, and actually the ping is really good for Europe. And all these together has led us to the thought that probably we should get India closer to the European part because it just will be more comfortable for the people. If you have anything to add, please.
No, it's mostly what you said.
Yep.
So just that from a technical aspect, our European server and the European cluster is just a bigger cluster in terms of population. So even if Indian players are playing outside of normal peak hours for the European cluster, there's going to be enough players on the European server to support normal matchmaking, which might not be the case if they were playing on the Asian server. So, as Victor said, it's a quality of life situation. That just matchmaking will be faster, people will be able to get into battles faster and have a better experience.
Yep.
Okay. So Indian gamers are not known for like spending money on games, especially on premium model games. So like in hindsight, even in PUBG Mobile, which is the most played game in India, like less than 1% of monthly active users spend on the game. How are you like focusing on bringing in the revenue from Indian gamers?
That's generally fine, I think. So, from our point of view, there are players who pay and there are players who don't pay. We're a free-to-play game anyway, and we understand that we anyway need to have players that don't pay. And especially in a situation where, at least for now, we're having them on the same cluster. That just means that we don't expect all Indian players to be payers or necessarily to convert to payers with the same rates, just because there's no potential cost structure that they need to uphold themselves. We're going to get our revenue from the players who want to support the game and who can support the game. And that being said, we're obviously still going to adjust our structure in terms of pricing for the market here to make sure that that it is possible for people to participate in premium content if they want to. But if they don't want to, we're more than happy to have those players in the game as well.
Absolutely. And on top of that, our game cannot be directly compared to games like PUBG or any other game because the target audience of the game actually is older people. It's slower. It's more about the tactics. And even now, we see that the social demographics of the current players we have in India is, as in other territories, pretty much different.
Okay.
And now, on the current base, we see a higher number of paying users, actually, than just 1%. So for us, but as Artur mentioned, money, of course, we are doing business, and the percentage of paying users is important. But the thing is that we mostly care about the users playing our game. These are the most important thing. You play the game, and we, as a business, will find a proper way to work and to provide the better service that we can get to everybody. And monetization, it will either happen eventually when people feel like, hey, this is the right thing. I would love to do it because we have no blockers. There is no paywall where you face and that's it. You're done. If more people will be into it, we have more chances to get the revenue out of it. And it will increase the comfort of play, as Artur mentioned, of other players on the server, because the more people we have, the better online we have, the faster matchmaking, the better quality of service we give to our audience. Actually, this is the main goal.
Another thing I wanted to ask is Indian gamers are getting more and more interested into esports. So do you think World of Warships has a potential esports title, especially in this country?
It depends on the definition of esports, because there is esports with the fancy grand finals, like renting the stadiums and all these things. Probably, and this is not the path that we're gonna take as a product. Most of our audience is much older. They are competitive players. We have a lot of tournaments. We have different ranked seasons, and the people enjoy playing it. We have a special tournament series in different territories. Maybe some of them will be special for India, but most likely I think it will be what we have for the Europe,
Yes.
the same tournaments. The system is there. A lot of people are playing competitive, but I would call this competitive gaming because our game is about competition by itself. But esports, in the understanding of League of Legends or Counter-Strike, I don't think our audience will really demand it. But if we see that the demand is increasing, nothing is impossible.
I think from the development perspective, we've not been focusing too much on esports specific features just because of the very specific gameplay design of our game. As Victor mentioned, it's a very slow game, which means that it's also not a very emotional thing to watch necessarily in terms of traditional esports, which is being consumed also and then commented on and stuff. So we do have tournaments, but they're not very good for people who don't know the game. If you're not already playing, there's no context for you to actually watch it. So in that sense, we've mostly invested into gameplay features that we have as part of the core gameplay. As Victor mentioned, ranked seasons and clan gameplay. And we kind of, on the side, grow or help grow a grassroots esports community to see how much of that is going to then transform into external tournaments or potential offline events. In the long-term future for development, I believe that anyway the game will have more esports features just because of the growing core audience, which will kind of result out of this grassroots movement. There will be more and more players who are more into competitive, more clans as the game progresses. And that share of that hardcore community in the global audience will keep on increasing. So eventually we'll be investing in those features more, but it's not going to be in the nearest future. It's a very long-term assessment for me.
Actually, we have a pretty good basics, even for the streaming opportunities of the tournament. We have a pretty well-developed spectator mode for the one who streams. And actually, it's pretty much diversified because a camera that shows what's happening in the game, it can be connected to a torpedo, to a flying shell, to a plane, and all these things together, they create a pretty juicy picture, actually. But as Artur completely correctly mentioned, in some ways our game is pretty slow, and the beginning of every single match is slow. It takes time. So the people who are enjoying it are those who actually playing the game. But for the external guy, it may look not that attractive, because the action is not happening 24/7 all the time, like happening in other games.
So as gamers, we all love the reward system. So do you have any plans of rewarding extremely dedicated players, especially for this region?
Sure, we do. So in general, we kind of pride ourselves as being one of the more generous free-to-play games in general in the industry. And you can read comments like that from our community, both on our official forums and also on external platforms like Reddit. People are usually comparing, and then, and that usually happens in the context of discussions about, hey, I don't like a feature, but at least I get a lot of rewards. So we've built a gameplay system and a gameplay loop that rewards constant gameplay. We have event arcs that span over each quarter, where those are usually tied to either some historical event that happened during that quarter or to a release of a new ship line, for example. And those usually contain different missions where players can go into the game and just play it or complete very specific goals and then earn themed rewards based on whatever the event arc is themed with.
Even now with the birthday event, We
Yes.
have so many different activities.
Exactly.
For
And then-
example, you can get the most precious things in the game, like the super containers, by just playing on certain ships.
And this is an example of the events that we do in between event arcs. So we usually have a certain amount of milestones during the year. One of them is always our birthday, which is 17th of September. So around that, we usually have a big in-game event where people can just get a lot of stuff. And then we have the usual Halloween and the usual April Fool's events where we, allow ourselves to experiment a bit with crazy, space battle modes or Halloween battle modes. And obviously, during those, players can also get, themed skins and all kinds of in-game stuff. And we're also going to do stuff that's very specific for Indian players, but most likely within those systems. So there might be, specific missions for Indian players to earn India-specific stuff. Potentially also Indian ships in the game, Delhi and Mysore. So yeah, we're going to have a lot of stuff.
Okay, so I talked to a few people on Discord on a North American server. So they were saying like Wargaming has this thing that they incline towards US ships more because like what they said is that US gamers spend the most money in this game. So when new updates roll out, US ships are like overpowered. So what do you have to say about that?
I can comment on the fact whether ships are overpowered or not. And obviously, we try to avoid that. Sometimes it does happen, but relatively rarely. But to be perfectly honest, we do understand that players also have different perceptions in terms of they're focused on very specific things about the game. If it's American players, they will be focused more on American ships. So their opinions on American ships will also be stronger, whether they're positive opinions or negative opinions. So for some people, a ship might be not powerful enough because I really care about that ship. It's my ship. I want to own it and I want to play it. And obviously, if it's very important for me and I want to play it, I also want it to be the strongest ship, right? And for people who don't care about that ship as much, it might be overpowered because I have to play against that ship in the game. So obviously, I don't want it to be super powerful because it's going to be my enemy. So there are a lot of these opinions. And to be perfectly fair, it does happen that some ships turn out OP after they go through our rigorous pipeline of testing. But it's not many ships per year out of all of the ships that we release. Sometimes it does happen, but very, very rarely. And in terms of, let's say, having a bias towards producing certain ships like American ships, that's not generally true. The way we build our pipeline for ships is first of all, we try to treat each region relatively equally. So we have a set amount of slots for ships in each region. And we try to fill those relatively equally so that we have, Asian ships for the Asian cluster, we have American ships for the American cluster, and we have European ships for the European cluster, and so on and so forth. But you have to also consider what the cluster makeup is. So American cluster is mostly just Americans. It's one big nation. The same for CIS cluster. It's mostly just Russians, one big nation. For the other clusters, we have to divide. For Europeans, there are a lot of European nations. For Asians, there are also a lot of Asian nations, and all of them want to have their ships. So that's why there's a kind of a perception that we have more American ships or more Russian ships. In some way we do, but we try to equal it out, at least on a cluster basis.
Yep. And on top of that, actually, it's a very popular community belief. If you go to American forums, you can read either American saying that the Russian ships are overpowered because the game is developed in Russia, so obviously the Russian ships are shooting the Stalinium shells and they just destroy everything around them, which is not true if you look into the balance numbers. Russians believe that American ships are overpowered together with the German ships, and the Asians feel it's a constant thing happening. Everybody thinks that the other country is overpowered. But as Artur mentioned, yes, it happens. Sometimes certain ships are OP, but they are getting balanced in the end, and that's actually it. Because if we once again take it down to the numbers, our balance numbers show that the lion's part of all our ships are actually well balanced. So they have the.
And the point is that we like to hear those kinds of comments because it means that our players are emotionally engaged with the game.
True.
So that's generally good for us to hear those comments.
So, do you have any release date on the Submarines update?
Good question. Generally speaking, we want to release. So we're going to start testing, I think, in the next actually couple of days. I think next week, or even this week. I don't honestly remember, but very, very soon we're going to do closed testing and start inviting players. And after that, we're going to have a PvP event in the game, which is going to be next update, next month. And we're going to keep that as a separate game mode for a few months. Yeah, and after that, we hope, if balancing goes well, to be able to integrate submarines into the rest of the game, probably in the second quarter of next year, if everything goes well.
Yeah, we have to be very careful with it, and that's why we are rolling it out like in parts. Because within this year, actually, the game survived the biggest changes it has ever had. Like the CVs, like the aircraft carriers, were completely, I would say, recreated from the scratch. Now with submarines, we had to like recreate all the maps from the scratch because right now we have the depth, and the gameplay will once again be enriched with a new class. So actually, those are the biggest changes we've ever had. Literally, like yesterday, our game turned 4 years, and the fourth year of our game, and the fifth will be the most rich for new content, new things, and actually the new gameplay decisions. It's complicated, but at the same time, this is what we want to have because we all are also big fans of like the Navy themed, and a Navy game without the subs. It's already a completely different story. So,
okay, I just have two more questions. Like, how do you see the partnership between you and the Indian brands?
Well,
in what way?
In what way? As in, how is it benefiting you from your perspective?
Our main goal actually is to get the visibility on the market. So, and the local brands they already have the audience and the community and the access to the people on the market. So, and we want, of course, to utilize that in our favor. We want to get access. We want people to know that World of Warships is officially in India. Well, for brands, it's also they get benefits from this cooperation on their side. So it's like a win-win solution for all of us. And actually, we use these kind of tactics globally. I mean, it's not just for India. It's a classical marketing move that two brands that are not competing with each other actually benefit from cooperation.
And on a technical side, it ties into what we were talking about before in terms of why Europe and why Asia. Because if we want to, offer the best experience to players in India, it makes sense for us to also partner with an internet provider, for example, just because it will also allow us to make sure that not only our choice of server and of prime times for Indian users are effective, but also that they have the infrastructure available and somehow promoted by us as well. To be able to play the game comfortably. So it was a good match for us.
And last, about the regional pricing. How do you describe it to the Indian users?
Well, it will be adopted to the market standards because, of course, we know that our game is it's not the cheapest game on the market, but at the same time, no paywalls that we have, and we do understand that we should adopt these to different regions. So that's why we apply different pricing policies for different regions.